The University of Mississippi is investigating a student who has gone viral for mimicking a monkey toward a black woman participating in a pro-Palestinian protest. The university has opened a student conduct investigation after the protesters were met last week by actions that appear to convey hostility and racist overtones. The student, identified as James J.P. Staples, was caught on video making the sounds and gestures, has also been removed from his fraternity. Phi Delta Theta General Headquarters released this statement. The past few weeks have been challenging for many colleges and universities across the United States as they struggle to balance the protection of free speech with maintaining appropriate and respectful discourse among demonstrators and others within the campus community. As part of that community, Phi Delta Theta recognizes that freedom of expression is part of the collegiate experience. However, the fraternity is committed to upholding its principles as a private membership organization. After reviewing the incident, it was determined that the individual's behavior was unacceptable. The action in question was offensive, outside the bounds of this discourse, and contradictory to our values. In partnership with local alumni, undergraduate leadership, and the university, disciplinary due process was initiated, which resulted in the removal of membership. The situation will continue to be monitored in cooperation with any further investigation. Palestinian protesters were demonstrating in a barricaded zone Thursday when an estimated 200 counter-protesters surrounded them. Some held American flags, Donald Trump flags, and others dressed in red, white, and blue. Gavin, man, wow. Staying in Mississippi, here we are, right? You see this every day with what you're doing with The Root and in all of your other work. Talk to me about how people have talked so much about the pro-Palestinian protesters are losing the message by taking this action or that action, but few people have shared stories about what the counter-protesters have been doing, which this story highlights. How are you processing what we just watched and the statement made by the fraternity as well?
Well, look, Omokongo, anyone from the South, like I am, I'm from Georgia. We unfortunately know how a lot of these white fraternities operate. So I can't say that I'm surprised to learn about what happened, to see this video, to see the photos, not only at Ole Miss, but at universities across the country, not only in the South, by the way. Nor am I surprised that you had Republicans, by the way, out there like Representative Mike Collins from my home state and the governor of Mississippi, Tate Reeves, who took to social media to voice their support for what we saw from these counter protesters. And I could go on and on, obviously, about the racism that we see in this video. And by the way, the unchecked racism that unfortunately transpires so oftentimes outside of the view of the camera, which, by the way, imagine the vile things that this student has done and said behind closed doors. It's only now that he was caught being a racist on camera that his frat actually kicked him out. So, you know, and I haven't seen the results of this disciplinary action that the school is taking. I hope that it results in some strong action, because we're already seeing at other universities the pro-Palestinian students being suspended for their protest. And I also want to use this opportunity to remind all of our viewers that as the election approaches, Donald Trump actually posted videos from the counter protesters and said, quote, "Thank you, Ole Miss, MAGA." So for all those out there who think Trump cares about black people, I know there's some black folks out there who do think that. Make no mistake, he does not. At the same time, I also want to speak to some of our young people who are out there speaking their truth to power and protesting. Continue to do that, but at the same time, know your legal rights and be smart with your protest, because we, in our community, oftentimes we don't have the same institutional support and backing that some of those counter protesters do. We don't have daddy or mommies or granddaddies or grandmommies or great granddaddy or great grandmommies money to fall back on. And so I salute the young people who are peacefully protesting out there, unlike the counter protesters who are doing anything but peaceful protest. But to our students, to our young people, make sure you know your legal rights and make sure that you don't sacrifice your educational journey along the way.
No, absolutely. And Dr. Malveaux, as former school, university president of Bennett College, how would you have handled what you've seen?
Well, students have a right to protest, and I support that fully. You're going to have the countervailing. It has to be respectful. I would have thrown all those little, those Ole Miss brothers off the campus. They were reprehensible. They were not respectful. They were racist. But, Gavin said something to the students. I want to say something to all of them as well. When you go out here, make sure and take a page out of Roland Martin's book. Have your camera. Take their pictures. Identify them. Call them out. Make sure people know, and their mamas and daddies know, that they are racist little fools who are. Now in Mississippi, that's not alarming. I mean, like I said, I some of y'all know my story, but I spent a year. I got put out of high schools in San Francisco, so I had to go to high school in Mississippi. It transformed me in some ways. It taught me a lot, but I had never experienced, I'm like 15, 16. I'd never experienced that kind of racism. But people would just like the video we saw, casually call you the N-word. And if you were a woman, it wasn't just an N, it was NB, and just like someone would say, "Hi, Julian," it would be, "Hey, NB," and no, just like no filter. So that behavior is not unanticipated, but the leadership at Ole Miss, frankly, has tolerated it. Again, I told you my mom taught at Ole Miss. I've been to Ole Miss. The casual racism there is just amazing. I respect and admire the Black students who go there. I mean, it's theoretically the best college in Mississippi, so people want to go there for that, for the networking. If they're going to be a lawyer, I mean, the law school is supposed to be the best in the state, and so people want to go there for the contacts and all of that. They might want to look down the road to Tougaloo or Jackson State for a more compatible environment. But folks want to go there, but they're always under siege. When my mom was there, her house became like a refuge. The students would just go and hang out at her house because, they needed a refuge. Young ladies had attacks on them in the dormitories. Racial sexual slurs were used. And you saw the little, never mind, I'm not going to go there. I'm on television. But you saw the little man grabbing his non-crotch. And so I didn't go there halfway. His non-crotch. And I do not understand why people feel like a need to do that. You see the cameras, fool. What are you doing? You have a mama and daddy and sisters and brothers. What is wrong with you? But as I said, back to, I think that university presidents have kind of wussed out at some level because you have to support the right to protest. And you have to insist on civil protest. I think when some of these Jewish students are saying, "Oh, gee, I feel so threatened," why? But I saw a young woman on television this morning. She said whenever she heard the words "from the river to the sea," she felt threatened. And my response in my head was, well, then you want to feel threatened. Because contextually, that does not mean eliminate Jewish people. It means that Palestinians want their rights too, from the river to the sea. They want to be recognized. That's what this is all about. So I think university leadership, many presidents are bowing to donors. And of course, your number one job as a college president is to raise money. So they're bowing to donors who are insisting on action. I think that many are afraid that when you embrace Palestinian rights, you're automatically considered anti-Semitic, which is not the case, but that is what many people are claiming. And so I think that university presidents are stuck between a rock and a hard place, but they must stand up for justice. They must stand up for the First Amendment. One of the things that I haven't seen a lot of is probably happening, and I don't know about it, but there need to be teach-ins. I mean, this is commencement time, so there's not going to be a lot of time for that. But people need, when the first October 7th started, it would have been beautiful to have seen campus after campus doing teach-ins, teaching the history. People don't know the history. They think Hamas just dropped out the sky and decided to start attacking Israel. Let's tell the whole story. Let's go back to 1948. Let's look at a map of Palestine in 1948 and then in 1968 and see about how much territory has been taken. That does not justify, but it does say universities have a right, universities have a responsibility to educate their students. And they have a right to demand that students be respectful, but also that students be educated. Students have First Amendment rights.
No, absolutely. And Gavin, lastly to you again, wanted to come back to you because, you're from Georgia. We've seen what's happening in Mississippi. When I was looking at those protesters, I saw nothing that had to do with Palestine, Israel, Hamas, or anything. I saw the monkey demonstrations, and also, the sister, a plus-size sister as well, the references to Lizzo. It seems like they were taking every opportunity to throw out pretty much any type of racial, fatphobic, and misogynistic slurs that they can spout towards her. Should we be expecting more of this as we're going into the 2024 election, given that they were also putting out these MAGA and Trump supporting signs as well? And do we need to just brace up for it?
I think we absolutely do. And I'm glad you mentioned the MAGA signs, because we've been seeing a lot of those at these counter protests as well. I mean, this is how the MAGA mob mentality operates, right? And this is not new in our country. We've had the modern day MAGA mob mentality here since the very founding of our country. And it's looked differently throughout time. It's looked differently during slavery. It's looked differently during Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the Civil Rights era. And in the present, it's looked differently throughout history. But you notice a lot of the same characteristics. And it's why Donald Trump rose to power in the first place. It's because he's been able, on the heels of the election of our nation's first Black president, to tap into a lot of racial animus and a lot of racial fear. That's why Donald Trump and a lot of his MAGA cronies talk so much about immigration. They talk now about wanting to crack down on anti-white racism. Those sorts of topics, those sorts of policies that Donald Trump and his allies and his cronies are ready to reenact in a second term are what's motivating a lot of these folks that you're seeing. A lot of these people who showed up with the Trump flags and who are taunting the protesters and all of that, they don't care about what's going on in the Middle East. They don't care about these issues. This is all just hate. And it's what Donald Trump has fueled. And so as we get closer and closer to the election, because I think a lot of people for now are still very checked out of the election. So as we get closer to the election, we certainly should expect to see more of this. We should recognize, again, that when we're looking at these counter protests happen, we're looking at these attitudes throughout our country, that they go back to one man. Right now, at least, it's Donald Trump. But even if Donald Trump is to lose, those attitudes and those feelings will not go anywhere. So this goes far beyond the election. This goes to a lot of feelings and hatred that people have and are harboring right now that Donald Trump can tap into, but they're not going to go away even after he loses. So we should brace ourselves.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. And, Nina Simone wrote a song about this at the end of the day, and we know what that joint was called. And so it just keeps roaring its head. But we're going to keep talking about it because that's what we do.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.